right, welcome everybody back to another episode of the Big Doug and Carmi Show, your one-stop shop for all things Commanders. Usually these are opposition Wednesdays, but as you know, things have been a little crazy with the playoff schedule, so we've been doing these on Friday today to get us a little closer to the Lions from the Detroit podcast and the editor of the Detroit Lions on SI, John Makeroon, is our guest today. John, how are you?
Doug, it's great, man. It's the playoffs, the divisional round. The Lions last week had a bye week. Now, this weekend at Ford Field in prime time, the Commanders come to town. And when the playoffs were, when the NFC teams were announced, I kind of said, I think I'd like to see the Commanders. Lions haven't played that team yet. Jaden Daniels is box office. So now it's the Lions fans have asked, and now the Commanders will come to town. I'm curious to see how this contest is going to shake out, but it should be a good one.
I think it will be a good one. Two teams that are highly aggressive. We'll get to all the action. Before we do that, your first time on the podcast, I'm kind of curious how you got started in all this.
Yeah, in 2013, look, I'm a big Detroit sports fan, grew up locally, and in 2013, look, I'm a sports fan. We would talk to my cousin and his joy. He grew up and learned about radio. I had friends that worked in radio, so I was a big fan of sports talk radio, like a lot of people. And once I learned about podcasting and the way in which someone could be creative on their own, I took the plunge with my cousin in 2013, and we steadily grew. And once I got the itch to cover sports, it kind of started in a funny way in that I did not want to be in the media. But what ended up happening was I would invite guests, and typically most would return the favor if they had a platform or if they had an interview or they had a show. I would invite them on my podcast, and they would invite me to their show. Well, there was a local guy that I had on the show quite a bit, went to Michigan State. I went there and I wanted to get on his television show. So I shot him a message and said, hey, can you return the favor? I want to get on the show. And he's like, my producer doesn't know who the heck you are. You're just a podcaster and you're not in the media. So I said, okay, I'll just go into the media. And I used a little bit of spite and people thinking that an internet podcaster couldn't cover the sports, let alone the NFL, to keep growing. And I used it as a way to say, you know what? I can cover college sports. I can cover local. One of my alma maters when I went to my master's degree, I went to the University of Detroit Mercy as well to get a master's degree. So I covered college basketball, the NCAA tournament, and then I just worked my way up the totem pole to cover the NFL. And the podcast grew exponentially. And then SI came knocking for an opportunity, and it's been great for the last 6 years. Since 2019, I've covered the NFL and the Detroit Lions. So it's just a traditional story of, hey, you tell me I can't do something, and I'm a guy that says I can do it all. And I've been loving life. And now I covered a bad team. Now I'm covering a good football team. So it's been a fun ride. And I encourage everybody that if you love broadcasting, man, it's just going on your own is a great. Now you've seen, now the blessing is as the tides have turned, athletes have did it. And as the bigger athletes do them, it just gives credibility for me knowing that in 2013 podcasts would change the world. And I absolutely love it. That's why I never say no. I love coming on all shows. So it's great.
No, it's incredible. And this is it's interesting you were mentioning the highs and lows. This is two teams that are kind of doing similar things here. Those that watch this podcast know I love two things, the Washington Commanders and the Georgia Bulldogs. So I followed the Lions for a while simply because of Matthew Stafford. It's interesting, pretty unique to be able to go from Matthew Stafford to Jared Goff, who I think is one of the more underrated players in the league.
Yeah, it's a trade that ended up helping the Detroit Lions and Matthew Stafford. He gets his Super Bowl, and Jared Goff, when he had the fallout with the Rams, was looking for an opportunity. And you realize that when the trade happened, his reputation kind of took a hit because people just felt across the league, myself included, that, hey, if Sean McVay, a talented offensive mind, doesn't believe in you, what are the chances really that you're going to go to Detroit, of all places, to try and resurrect? But it goes to show you that the Lions had a similar mentality, which was, no, we see something in Jared Goff that could make him successful. We see his attitude, his grit. We see that, hey, if we build an offensive line, if we build an offense that suits his needs, he can have success. And for Detroit, that was starved for any type of playoff success, Jared Goff right now is the perfect leader for the Detroit Lions, is a winner, and his general manager, Brad Holmes, knows everything about him coming from
That's right.
A to the Detroit Lions, understood exactly how to build a roster and support this talented quarterback, a former number one overall pick. And then at the same token, Ben Johnson did the same thing. He did the work to learn about his quarterback and crafted an offense that suits him, and that's why the Lions are winning.
What is it that we those that maybe didn't see Jared Goff in a certain light, or not watching the Lions on an everyday basis? What is it that most people get wrong about Jared Goff?
Yeah, and I think I was definitely in the camp that was wrong. I viewed it as, okay, the Lions are going to view this as a bridge quarterback. They're going to draft someone young, and they're going to build the way a lot of teams build. You see the Vikings in the division, they went young. The Packers went with Jordan Love. So I thought, okay, you got a veteran. He'll teach the young cat, and then they'll move on. But what ends up happening, it doesn't happen too often, but there are instances in which quarterbacks develop and get better. And I thought that Jared Goff pretty much peaked. I think that what people didn't realize, myself included, Jared Goff could get better. Jared Goff could read defenses better. And also too, I think he getting traded was the chip on the shoulder that maybe he needed to get over the hump. One thing is this: he can make all the throws. I think the one thing that people get wrong is he's a great pocket passer. And I think people hyper focus on the fact that he's not mobile. But the other aspect of playing the quarterback position is reading defenses, getting into the right play, understanding the strengths and weaknesses of the defense you're going against, and then picking apart all the weaknesses that you can expose. And Jared Goff is cerebral. I think he's a very smart quarterback, and he can make the throws needed to win football games. But, in this day and age, and I asked Dan Campbell this directly because I go to the practices. I said, okay, you said that he's entering his prime. What's it going to take for him to be a Super Bowl caliber quarterback? And Dan gave a little bit of a coach speak answer like, hey, just do your job. We don't rely on just one person. But to me, I think that in the biggest of big games, and Jaden Daniels now is going to enter into that conversation, the quarterback's got to make throws. He's got to be making sure that in big games you don't turn the ball over, you play clean, and you make a couple big throws when needed. And I think if there's a quarterback ready, if you are a longtime football fan, you remember that iconic scene when Steve Young was in the Super Bowl and he had an opportunity. Everyone was talking, can he win it? Is he just a mobile guy? Is he a real quarterback? He wins the Super Bowl and his teammate lifts the veil of pressure off of him. I think that's what could happen with Jared Goff, is that if he wins a Super Bowl, I think the eyes of the NFL world will definitely give him the respect that he deserves for being a very solid pocket passer.
I know them sure that they would not be talking about this out loud, and maybe not even to themselves within the building. But you tell me if I'm wrong. It feels like this is an important year for Detroit, knowing that there's a good chance both coordinators leave. Feels like maybe that's a little added pressure to Detroit this year. No?
Yeah, same. I think similarly with the Commanders, I think Cliff Kingsbury is a name that will be sought after. Maybe not this year, maybe next year or so. But I do think that Cliff Kingsbury is a very talented coordinator and has helped develop Jaden Daniels. I wonder if he wants to continue that relationship. And clearly, I think he fits that coordinator role comfortably. But all coordinators, most of them, tend to want to have an opportunity to run their own team. And Ben Johnson, I think, is the head of the class. He is an offensive genius. I think his Rolodex of play calls is vast. It is one thing to be able to call plays. It's another thing to be able to break down defenses and use their weaknesses that others have taken advantage of and deploy it in your own system. Ben Johnson's ready. I think that from what you're hearing, it probably lends towards a relationship developing with Tom Brady with the Raiders. And I think that relationship, probably knowing that Tom Brady is going to be coming to town here in the next 24 hours to see Ben Johnson handle business, I think he's ready. And Aaron Glenn, I think everybody involved realizes that his experience playing in the league, the work that he's done with Dan Campbell, and the defense that he put together this year really has opened the eyes to many people that, all right, this is a guy that's ready. And I think that the buzz is real. And I said on the Detroit Sports Podcast today, I said that it kind of has a feel of like a nice little bidding war going to start with the Saints and the Jets. Two of his former ties, they should be working to get him in the mix, because I think he's a leader of men. I do believe in what he's done. He listen, Doug, half the battle in coaching is to get the respect of the players. That's half the battle. Everybody you talk to that comes through Detroit raves about Aaron Glenn and how he treats his players, how he puts them in a position to succeed. But at the same time, if you don't dot your I's and cross your T's, you're going to hear about it. You're going to get coached hard, but in a way that players will listen, respect, and respond to coach. The former regime, within 24 hours, within a week, alienated half the locker room. And that goes to show you that Matt Patricia had the similar ideas of grit and playing physical, but he missed out on the biggest goal that you got to achieve early is you got to gain the respect of the locker room. And by ripping your best player in front of the whole team, he lost the locker room pretty fast in his first year, and he never recovered. Dan Campbell has put together a coaching staff full of ex-players that force you to respect them. So I think that, yes, to your question, they definitely need to win. It's an advantage. But at the same time, Dan Campbell, I think, is also smart at when these guys potentially leave, he'll restock the coaching shelf with a lot of talented guys.
David Montgomery back. I'm amazed that he's back this quickly. I was telling one of my buddies, though, I wonder if this is a blessing for Washington, oddly enough, because anytime Jahmyr Gibbs is not touching the ball feels like a win for the other team. How much usage will Montgomery have? And am I overthinking it? Because obviously David Montgomery can hurt you.
Yeah, is a good player. And many people thought he was having a season-ending situation with the MCL, seeking multiple opinions. People thought, okay, maybe this is an opportunity that maybe he's going to miss out on. But nope, he battled. He sought multiple opinions. And I think that he's an individual that I think when you look at it, and, I think if you're a diehard Commanders fan, you recognize that one of the weaknesses of the Commanders is their defensive line and their rush defense. So prime opportunity with David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs, one of the best running back duos that you got to play to your strengths. I expect the Lions to run the ball quite a bit, to establish the run. And the question, on our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast, I posted a practice video showing David Montgomery. He looks ready to go. He looks that he's not going to have too many ill effects of the MCL injury. But at the same token, pretty early on, I do think that having the 1-2 punch of Gibbs and Montgomery gives the coaching staff a lot of flexibility that, and here the talk in Detroit is might be time to hand the keys to Jahmyr Gibbs. He's got that mentality, and he's got the talent that everyone now understands why the Lions made him a first-round pick. So it's a 1-2 punch, and it's going to be imperative for the Commanders' defensive line to try and figure it out, and led by Bobby Wagner. I'm curious to see how they're going to stop the Lions' offense and try and stop the running game.
Yeah, and Laporta too, who I think, at least according to my fantasy team, had a down year this year, but the Commanders have routinely struggled against tight ends. I'm curious how Laporta will be used in this matchup against the Commanders.
Yeah, it's a nice matchup too. You guys got a nice tight end with Zach Ertz. We joke
He's
around
been
here, the
playing well.
Lions legend, the 1 week legend that he spent in town, but man, over 90 receptions, and he's a safety valve for Jaden Daniels. And that'll be something I think the Commanders need to focus in on is, hey, try to exploit the Lions defense, use Ertz as a way to kind of draw attention away from McLaurin and Brown and things like that. And if Ertz gets going, yeah, you help because I think the biggest key is going to be, hey, can the Commanders keep up with the Lions offense? The Lions offense is prolific, and everybody kind of sees it. And that'll be something to see is, hey, how much Ertz does get involved as well, because the Lions are going to give attention to McLaurin and Brown. But on our side, we got two good tight ends as well in Brock Bowers. Look at that, I said Brock Bowers on the mind because of his prolific. He's going to break Sam Laporta's record in Brock Wright and Sam Laporta. Sam Laporta burst on the scene his rookie year, but this year it's been a little bit of a different up and down year. I wouldn't say sophomore slump, but I would say that the emergence of Jameson Williams and Gibbs took away some of his targets, and an injury midway through the year kind of took away some of his usage. So he didn't get the Brock Bowers treatment this year, but in the last 5-game window, when you look at the splits, it's pretty good for Sam Laporta. Targeted, looking like the safety valve that Jared Goff would love, and I expect him to play very well. It's going to be a fun game for the tight ends. I do see a lot of usage for Sam Laporta and Brock Wright as well, because not only are they good in the pass game, they're great blockers. And that's one thing the Lions emphasize is, hey, you may not be getting targeted, but you better do the work, the dirty work too. And that's also a secret why the Lions run game is good, is the blocking from St. Brown, JMO, and the tight ends out of this world. Solid blockers.
You've mentioned Jameson Williams a couple of times. This is year 3 for him, I believe. Took a little bit to get going, but he looks like the guy that I recall from Alabama. It must be nice to see him doing what the Lions were expecting from him when they drafted him.
Yeah, and Dan Campbell, in his talk this week, was a little bit emotional talking about Jameson Williams, saying that, hey, he's got a lot of love and respect for a young player that kind of had some bumps and some maturity bumps that kind of put some people, turned him off a little bit to Jameson Williams and questioning his maturity. But he was young, and he came into the NFL, just like a typical story. You give a young individual a lot of money, a lot of freedom, and a lot of, it's basically the first time going through something like that. It's shocking. There's a lot of things you get thrown at you. And for Jameson Williams, the question mark wasn't his talent on the field. It was just, hey, you violated a league rule with the gambling, not on the NFL, but gambling in a quote unquote on team property when on the road in a hotel. So there's a lot of technicality rules. And this year, having the situation with not passing a league test, missing a couple games there, combined with a legal situation that gets cleared up. So a lot of small maturity kind of things popped up, and people were like, with the talent, the number one ability is availability. And when you're missing games to suspension and you're having your name in the news for stuff outside, basically a lot of noise was around JMO. But all throughout this year, he worked to get better. And from the time he stepped foot on the field in training camp till now, he got better. He did what the coaching staff wanted. He did the work. And you can see it on the field. Route running is better. Explosive plays are there. Connection with Jared Goff. And the one thing, too, which is you can kind of see why Dan Campbell is successful. He got emotional, choked up. He said, we asked also Jameson Williams to kind of put your guard down, embrace your teammates, do stuff with them, talk to them, be part of the team. And I think that once he did that and embraced the people that were trying to help him and be around him, it made Dan Campbell, I think, even more emotional. Like, hey, he did it. He brought down his guard. He trusted us. He trusted his teammates. And Dan can see, and the Lions can see, hey, when you embrace our process and you follow the team culture and you're part of the group, I think maybe no small task. He showed up on his teammates' podcast, which he hadn't done. Amon-Ra St. Brown has a podcast. It's popular. And many people were wondering, well, naturally, Jameson should be on it, right? You got Amon-Ra interviewing Bears players. He's interviewing USC guys from his connection. You would think in 4 years, your own teammate that you're in a room with would be on the podcast. Well, this year, Jameson showed up and did great. And I think that for Jameson Williams, he's a home run threat. And to tell your audience, he's the X factor for the Lions. If the Lions are going to win a Super Bowl, he's got to be that big threat to help when defenses hone in on the Lions. So it's exciting times. We got a home run threat, and let's see. It's a JMO and Terry McLaurin. It's going to be a fun time to watch the offenses.
This is an odd question, I know, but if the Lions win the coin toss, will they defer or receive?
It's a super great question. I think that they take the football because look, in a big game, Jaden Daniels is going to have some level of pressure. All right. He knows that, okay, that in his mind, he sees on film the Detroit Lions offense scores a lot of points. And the expectation is the Commanders is going to have to match it. And so for the Lions, I think it would behoove them to get out to a lead, put a little extra pressure on Jaden to make those throws into those windows, to play to his capabilities, to make sure that he sees the lanes he's got to be in. So to play from behind, I think would challenge Jaden Daniels. And I think that, but he's up for the challenge. I think, many people are thinking that he's just a guy that can run and he can throw the ball. I love watching film on him. And the crazy part was, as I was saying a little bit earlier, is I got to meet him in Detroit when he did a charity event locally. So I talked to Jaden Daniels. I talked to Caleb Williams, Drake May. I was like, man, this group of quarterbacks,
Yeah.
they're going to be special. They're hungry, they're smart, they're polished, and they can play. And Jaden, you guys got a good one for the foreseeable future. And I think that to see the success that he's had on the road as a rookie, that's no small feat to be able to handle all that pressure and to be able to do some things. So props to him for his development. And you guys got a great coach in Dan Quinn. I loved Quinn with the Cowboys. I love his style. I just think he's a winner. And for the Detroit Lions, putting as much pressure on the Commanders is going to be imperative because in the end, you do have an inexperienced signal caller who's going to be seeing all these things for the first time. And I think that if the Commanders get comfortable, they build that confidence that they can be in this game, you're going to end up in a dogfight and something that, in the end, whenever you're in a close game, it could go the other way. The Lions know how to win close games, but so do the Commanders. And Jaden Daniels, you're a diehard. You're like, wow, finally a guy that when the moment and the lights are the brightest, he actually shows up, doesn't sling the football to the other team or make mistakes. Daniels plays well in crunch time, very poised, and that darn Hail Mary didn't help the Bears at all. It just boosted his confidence. So for me, take the ball, handle your strength, and put the Commanders on the defense right away.
Two more before we get out of here. The Lions, when they lose, it has been, I believe, against running quarterbacks. What will they do this week to kind of slow down what has been their Achilles heel, which is mobile quarterbacks?
Yeah, it's one of those deals where, look, it's a situation in which it's a little bit overstated because of some outliers in the past. Yes, the time the Lions played the Ravens and Lamar Jackson, he torched them. He just handled his business, but he does that to a lot of people. So now you go into the season, everybody's like, oh, the Lions have a hard time with running quarterbacks. So each time this year, that narrative popped up. Well, the Lions can't do it. The Lions can't do it. Well, guess what happened? Aaron Glenn adapted. He's got two great linebackers in Alex Anzalone and Jack Campbell. They fly to the football. So a lot of the running quarterbacks this year with an upgraded secondary, with better linebacking play, running quarterbacks are going to gain some yardage, but not to the degree that it hurt or wrecked the Lions this year. Lions are 15-2. So yeah, Josh Allen was an outlier as well in that he was able to not only move his feet, but he was able to make plays throwing the ball by moving the pocket. So that's where it's going to be imperative for the Lions is Jaden Daniels and that RPO can cause some issues and some confusion depending on where he takes it. But for the Lions, I think they're going to be gap sound. They're going to maintain their run lanes. They're not going to try and play hero ball. They're going to maintain their responsibilities and force Jaden to throw the football. And I think, he'll have a couple maybe runs where he extends a drive here or there. But I think the Lions, what they'll try and do is collapse the pocket and disrupt the timing of Jaden Daniels and force him into some mistakes. And I know you know this, Doug. You guys are giving up quite a bit of more sacks than you would like over the course of the year. And I think the goal will be similar to take advantage of an offensive line at times that can let up some pressure.
We always wrap these opposition shows like this, John. If Dan Quinn came up to you and said, "Hey, John, what's the key to beating the Detroit Lions on Saturday night?" You tell him what?
Oh, good. That's a great question. So if Dan asks me for advice, I first and foremost would tell him, "Hey, man, I love what you did with Dallas. You got the defensive swagger. I'd love to hear about his time as a head coach, why it went south there when he got the opportunity." But I would say, if you're the Commanders, all right, what you got to do is you got to hope that your run game, that the best defense against the Lions offense is for the offense to stay on the field. You run the ball, Robinson, Eckler, Daniels, they all ball out. You say, all right, I'd say, Dan, here are your stars. We all know them. McLaurin's got to be scary. De'Ami Brown's got to be worthy of being drafted ahead of Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's got to ball out. You got to protect Jaden Daniels. You got to run your offense, long drives, 6-7 minutes at a clip, kill the early momentum of the buzz that's going to be at Ford Field, get out to a lead. You hope that every opportunity in the red zone turns into touchdowns, and you limit mistakes, and you ride or die with the best players. I think that McLaurin should be testing the Lions secondary. And look, it's no knock on a young cornerback, but I tell Dan Quinn, kind of look around where number 0 is and see if you can force some DPIs against Terrion Arnold. Terrion's a good player. He's worthy of being a first-round pick, but he's inexperienced. And for whatever reason, and it happens across the league, young players don't get calls. They kind of get flagged a little bit more for DPIs. He's done a better job, but I would say that potentially we're looking at a McLaurin-Amik Robertson matchup. That probably is going to favor, both sides will make plays, but I think the advantage would come in on whoever's guarding, whoever Terrion Arnold takes, probably Brown. And you look to take advantage of some to see, hey, test it out, see how Terrion's doing early on, maybe a couple chances deep to see if, the officiating crew that's thrown the 4th most flags this year, if they are willing to start throwing the flags, you take advantage. And then I'd say feed Zach Ertz in the red zone, let him be a factor. And you try to stay on the field 40 minutes offensively, and you try to win this game 20-17.
The over-under is 55.5. You like the over or the under in this game?
I would love the over, but I'm potentially seeing 55, so 30-25. I have it 30-20, kind of that kind of game, so I would go under, but I do think there will be some points scored throughout this game. It's going to be a good one. I do think that nice chess match. I do think there is, and myself included, a lot of confidence that the Lions are playing well, but I have a tremendous amount of respect for what the Commanders do on film. They have good players. It just, given the fact that this game is in Detroit, the Lions are starving for success. It's one of those deals where I just think offensively, our high-end players, we have a couple more of them than the Commanders do. And I just think that collectively, bottom line, Jared Goff has more experience than Jaden Daniels, seen more things. I think he'll be able to handle man coverage that Dan Quinn throws at him. He'll handle the pressure just well enough. And unfortunately, just the high-end players favor the Lions right now. Jamison Williams, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Sam Laporta, Jahmyr Gibbs. That's going to be it's no disrespect to the Commanders. That's going to be tough for anybody to handle business. It's a good year for Washington. We respect them healthily. I can't wait to see how Daniels shines in the future. I wouldn't be saying the same things. I wouldn't be smiling this big when we talk again, maybe next year, maybe when it's for the NFC Championship. But right now, I'm comfortable sitting here telling your audience, and respectfully, it's going to be Lions 30 and the Commanders 20. Hopefully it's a good game. And hopefully, it's one of those games where everybody makes plays. You hope Jaden Daniels doesn't throw a bunch of picks and, starts the question of, can he win big games? And is the moment too big? You just hope that the Lions go in there and beat the Commanders.
John, this was great, buddy. I appreciate it. Enjoy the game on Saturday. And who knows what might happen.
Big Doug, thanks for the time. I look forward to maybe, a new rivalry emerges, reliving from the 90s. Maybe it's the Lions and the Commanders in the future for the NFC. Let's see what happens.
I wouldn't be mad at that. Thank you, buddy. I appreciate you. Oh, my goodness.